Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Plenty to get to here. Okay, first of all, lots of geopolitical things taking place, plenty of education as well, per usual. And then, of course, some moves are being made regarding the CDC, and I want to get into that a little bit later. I'm actually not that worried about the so-called CDC nominee. She's a psycho, certainly at face value, but I think this is another Fauci exposure move. Again, this was an individual advocating for not only COVID shots, but flu shots as well, and taking both at the exact same time. There's no way that this individual, again, would be actually nominated, let alone win the nomination. So, again, I think this is an exposure move. And this is going to be a tough position to fill because theoretically that position runs under the entire umbrella of RFK Jr. So again, why would he endorse this nominee unless, of course, he had complete control over this person? Then again, at the exact same time, is it a deep state pick? Are they pushing this individual to the forefront to have Donald Trump, of course, endorse this particular individual, which apparently he has? Dr. Latipo in Florida, I thought, would have been a great pick also, except for the fact that there are counties in the state of Florida that are looking to ban the COVID shots, and he knows now, because he's woken up to the process, that the COVID shots are pure poison, along with most shots, if not all, which, let's face it, it's all of them. So anyway, I'll get to that a little bit later, but I want to start here. First of all, there's a very interesting word that exists in the Q posts, and it's existed there, of course, since the beginning of the drops. And it's the term keystone. And the word keystone, of course, has basically multiple meanings. I'll just put it that way, as a lot of the phrases and sayings in those drops certainly do. Again, in some instances, keystone, of course, meant the Epstein Temple, and that entire temple with the archway, and how a keystone in an archway is, of course, the center stone that holds the entire archway up when it's all mortared together. If you remove the keystone, of course, then the other pieces just start to fall down. Thereby, if you can control the keystone, metaphorically, then you can control what goes on in the general area. Again, that had multiple meanings. Again, depending on, of course, the situation, the geographic area, you name it. Of course, Pennsylvania is the Keystone state. So Pennsylvania, of course, was being brought up as potentially being a keystone regarding election fraud, certainly back in 2020. And, of course, a lot of that conversation was taking place, and rightfully so. Then I came across this particular paper the other day, and I want to go through this just very briefly, but there's a PDF here that was put together and published essentially on April 8th of 1966. And this was a student thesis from an individual, certainly a Jewish individual, by the name of Sidney Gritz, Colonel Adjutant General's Corps. And it says the following at the top here again, student thesis. It says, this paper is an individual effort on the part of a student at the U.S. Army War College. It is furnished without comment by the college for such benefit to the user as may occur. And it says the following here. It is titled, Israel, Keystone of the Middle East. Now again, when you apply the term keystone, there is no doubt that what goes on in Israel and with Zionists there is in part the keystone to what goes on in the Middle East. You have individuals in the Middle East who know what Zionists and Jews have been doing there since that entire land was given to them. They also know that Zionists and Jews over there have been engaging in numerous proxy wars and numerous false flags for a very long time. Donald Trump knows this too. So if you can control the keystone, which of course would be Israel, and the money that essentially, again, flows to and from Israel, and certainly its politicians, which even its own people don't like Netanyahu, which isn't his real name, then ultimately you can control what goes on over there in the Middle East. And again, the way that Israel operates, and certainly the Zionists over there and the politicians, is they control numerous individuals in numerous areas. They take the money that, of course, we give them, unfortunately, along with laundering it numerous other ways, certainly with child trafficking, weapons running, and you name it. And then they make a tax on particular geographic areas where they, of course, deem it to be beneficial for their long-term goals. Everybody brings up Greater Israel as being an example. I personally don't think that that is something that is actually viable, and I don't think that that's something that's actually going to happen. There are people who disagree with me on that. And of course, lots of people would disagree with that take, but I don't think that's even possible because I don't think that Saudi Arabia wants it. I don't think that Egypt wants it, and I don't think the neighboring areas want it. But again, the reason that Assad left Syria was rather obvious. He was outnumbered, and he didn't have the money, and they didn't have the angle, and they weren't going to receive any power from anybody in the general area or any help from anybody in the general area to again fight back against the IDF, because then you would have a full-blown war in that regard. Certainly, again, with Biden, Obama, and others at the helm. Not to mention, there wasn't a whole lot of fighting in Syria when Donald Trump was in office. If any. I mean, hell, I don't know. There probably was. But even so, it certainly wasn't reported on. Either way, on the cue boards, here's what it says. Again, there are 9 posts that have the term Keystone in them. Some of them refer to, again, using the term Keystone basically as a focal point. As if to say, here are some people, here are some events, here are some places, find the keystone. Basically, find the thing that holds the whole thing together. There is one post here, which is post 167, which says, POTUS opened the door of all doors. It said, expand your thinking. What is the keystone? And again, that was on November 20th of 2017. There are numerous posts, again, having to do with the Rothschilds, Saudi Arabia, Soros, and then it simply asks the question, what is the keystone? And it says it over and over and over again. What is the keystone? What is the keystone? What is the thing that holds all of it together? Again, the thing that is holding and controlling our politicians, of course, is Mossad and the CIA and Zionists and blackmail and all of that. Blackmail, of course, being the tool that they use. Bribery, extortion, etc., etc. All of that stuff is the keystone. But if you can control that, then who do you really control? You're controlling the blackmailers, but you're also controlling the blackmailed. That's really the enemy. That's the person that you really have to go after first. And I honestly believe that that's been controlled to a great extent. The problem has to do with the disclosure to the American public that Israel and the term Zionism are not good. That none of that's good. Unfortunately, again, through brainwashing, blackmail, and a number of other, of course, elements, certainly ignorance being one of them, and a lack of actual history being taught in school, you would never arrive at a logical conclusion as to what is happening and why things have happened the way that they've happened. Which is exactly why, again, the JFK drops are so important. Because in there, you see the terms Zionism, Israel, Israeli intelligence, Mossad, etc., etc. And all of that matters. That's a big, big deal. And that's exactly why, again, this information is being disseminated to us in the fashion that it is, because look who's talking about it. It's platforms like this, it's platforms like the ones that you listen to, but of course it is not the Mossad CIA-owned media. They're never going to bring that up. They're not going to dive into those particular documents, let alone do a keyword search as to what exactly is mentioned within those files. They just aren't going to do it. Glenn Beck might try. Again, a Fox News show might try, but they're not going to get down to the real answers. So Israel, Mossad, Zionism, the CIA, those are really the keystones. Those are the massive pillars that are in the way here. And once those are controlled and once those are pulled, then of course it's game over. So let me get into this document again, which is titled Israel is the Keystone, or Israel, Keystone of the Middle East, rather. Again, written by a Sidney Gritz. Let me read the summary of this. There's a table of contents. The document's about 66 pages long, but I want to read the summary, and then I want to read the 2 or 3 page conclusion. Keep in mind, again, this is written by a Jew. And it's written by an individual who actually is advocating, of course, for Israel and their right to exist and their expansion in all of this. He's making the case that Israel has an opportunity to basically control a great deal in the Middle East, but it needs the help of the United States. It needs the cooperation of the Arab countries over there and a number of other things, also keeping in mind that this was written and put together, or at least published, on April 8th of 1966. So again, this is a pro-Israel, pro-Zionist individual writing this, but they're also, again, inadvertently proving that they are in fact the problem. So here's the summary. It says, quote, "The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 culminated a yearning which burned in the hearts of world Jewry for nearly 2,000 years. During these centuries, Jews have suffered untold persecution and were nearly wiped out in Europe during the Hitler regime in Germany." Well, not exactly, but perhaps they should have. It says, is it any great wonder, rather, that Zionism, as an emotional and political movement, had so much appeal to the Jewish people? It says, "The Middle East is the crossroads of the world, in which every major power has such extensive interests, and none can afford a shift in the balance of power. Since that fateful day in 1948, the very existence of Israel has been challenged by the Arab world, which has set as its course the removal of Israel from the face of the earth. This Arab-Israeli dispute has reached such proportions that it threatens not only peace in the Middle East, but the peace of the world as well. There are many issues which separate the Arabs and the Israelis. It says these involve borders, refugees, water, immigration, and many others. The real core issue, however, is the refusal of the Arabs to recognize the existence of Israel. All other differences could conceivably be resolved if the issue of existence was not ever present and seemingly insolvable. Moreover, as Israel grows and becomes more viable, the Arabs become increasingly alarmed and tensions grow stronger." Little side note, this of course is why you will hear politicians, congressmen and women, senators, you name it, all say, "Does Israel have a right to exist? Do they have a right to exist?" And then you'll hear, again, random people, random talking heads all over TV or on the streets with a camera and a microphone in their face ask the exact same stupid question. Again, the answer to the question is no. They really don't, because it was never theirs in the first place. I mean, they're gypsies, they're nomads. And again, it's also, of course, been proven that the individuals who live in Israel are not of Jewish bloodline, or not, again, the Jews of the Bible, so to speak. They're Khazarians, by and large. They're interbreeders, crossbreeders, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it goes on here. It says the following: although secondary to the right to exist, quote-unquote, issue, it says the use of the waters of the Jordan River poses grave problems and threatens the peace of the Middle East. It says this very nature of the land, arid and desert, makes water a necessity to sustain life. With 4 riparian, if I'm saying that right, states vying for its liquid gold, the Jordan River is viewed as a prize to be fought over. This issue is so potentially explosive that the United States has become deeply involved in the effort to bring about an equitable solution. It then wraps up and says, it is concluded that Israel's title to her existence as a sovereign state is sound, but that Arab acceptance can only be achieved through a process of evolution. The United States, can help the achievement of this goal by maintaining peace in the Middle East through continued economic aid, discouragement of an arms race, and acceleration of the joint water desalinization project in Israel, unquote. Again, there's a lot of historic aspects to all of that. A lot of the things, of course, that they state are completely inaccurate. But then again, when it comes to geography, the large point that they are making, which is an accurate one, is Israel is the keystone. If you can control that area and have good people control it, not bad people like Zionist Jews, for example, then again, positive things can happen there, and there can be less violence or no violence, where everybody, again, just sort of stays in their own sandbox and doesn't mix around, the sand buckets, We certainly don't want that, because then those, of course, are the wars that we get pulled into. Let me move down here to the conclusion and give this a quick read. Conclusions and recommendations. Again, keep in mind this was written back in the mid-60s. It says the following. Quote, United States policy in the Middle East can be summarized as an effort to ensure Israel's survival as an independent state and at the same time maintain friendly relations with the Arab world. On the surface, this would appear to be an impossible task to connote a vacillating policy. It says, for example, in 1948, the United States recognized the State of Israel within hours after she declared her independence. Well, not exactly. In 1956, we led the way in the United Nations in condemning Israel for her attack on Egypt during the Suez Crisis. We encouraged and aided Israel's water projects, but threatened to suspend financial assistance if she continued to construct pumping stations in the demilitarized zone. And we have provided extensive economic and military assistance to Israel and the Arab states, particularly Jordan, with full cognizance that they are avowed enemies. Okay? It says, what appears to be a vacillating policy is, in fact, a sincere effort to prevent a renewal of hostilities in the area. Considering the ethnic background of the Arabs and the Israelis, the deep-seated and emotional characteristics of their conflicting nationalisms, and the avowed refusal of the Arabs to recognize the existence of Israel, the United States can take no other course of action except to strive to maintain the status quo. Careful consideration must be given to the facts that we have major economic and political interests on both sides of the armistice line, that our population and citizenship include large numbers of Arabs and Jews, and that any outbreak of hostilities would inevitably involve us, perhaps militarily. Again, a side note here, I think that's what's happening now, is a shakeup of the status quo. The status quo over there has always been, we give Israel money, they spend it on killing innocent people to take more land. And they think, again, that land will be theirs. But when Donald Trump said, well, we're going to take over Gaza, and now you have Middle Eastern countries, not Israel, vying for property there in order to, again, develop it, redevelop it, give people homes, and bring about peace, that's the exact opposite of what Zionists want. So, again, all of the screaming and the shouting about Donald Trump, making bombing runs in Yemen, I would invite people to just consider a couple of things regarding that alone, and then I'll continue with this conclusion here. Again, this individual is making the case that Israel's the keystone. They think that it has to exist, and they have to control it. The good guys, however, and certainly people hopefully like you and me would say, no, we need to control it, because then we can neuter it, and then it has nowhere to go and nothing to do. And it has no power, no leverage, no anything. I think that's ultimately the goal, because it would have to be. But with that said, people criticizing Donald Trump about making bombing runs in Yemen, we don't know who he's bombing. But what we do know, from a historic standpoint, is Yemen has always been a Zionist Mossad CIA hub for a very long time. They'll just mention Yemen, and then they'll say, well, there's terrorists in Yemen. Well, what kinds? Again, the media is reporting it as being bad people, when in fact, it could be. We could be making bombing runs against the CIA and Mossad right now. Who's to say? We really don't know. Again, are innocent people dying? Probably, because that's usually what happens when you drop a bomb. I'm not for that. I don't know anybody who is. But unfortunately, that's the state of affairs. And if these, again, hotspots have to be taken out by individuals, well, then that's what has to happen. But if you cut off the communications avenues of the bad guys and you box them in, then they have nowhere to go. So, again, I'm not going to pretend to know all the ins and outs. It's just the people who speak with such certainty about knowing exactly what's going on. Those are the people that can't be taken seriously, not in my opinion anyway. And I'm not saying like I have it all figured out. There's no way I would. But there's no way they would either. I'm just looking at this from multiple angles. That's really all I'm trying to do here. It goes on. It says, quote, "It is precisely for these reasons that we must play a watchful and waiting game. The United States can do nothing to solve the right to exist issue. We can only hope that our continued support of Israel as a member of the world community will eventually assuage the Arabs, since they too seek U.S. aid." It says, "In our efforts to prevent a renewal of hostilities, we should refrain from aggravating the growing arms race by refusing to sell arms of any kind to either side. It is conceivable that the Soviet Union and Communist China might then provide more arms. However, we have a trump card at our disposal to discourage such action." It says, "The economic aid we provide the Arabs and the Israelis spells food, clothing, social advancement, and perhaps even survival. It is extremely doubtful that either the Soviet Union or Communist China would match our contributions. The United States should continue economic aid, but should tie that aid to the condition that the arms race will cease. We should also make it clear that recipients of our aid may not turn to other sources of military assistance and arms." It says, "Disalienation appears to be the only logical solution to the Jordan River water problems. Creation of enough fresh water in Israel to enable her to continue development without large withdrawals from the Jordan system will leave more water for the Arab states. Although this is only one of the many problems in the Palestinian question or Palestine question, it says a step-by-step piecemeal solution is far better than no solution at all. The United States should place priority on completion of the joint desalting studies and encourage completion of the plant construction as quickly as possible. It's already been stated that very little can be done politically to solve the right to exist issue. Does this mean that all-out conflict between Arab world and Israel is the only solution, or is there perhaps a long-range hope to end this dilemma? If the status quo and relative peace can be maintained for a period of 1 or 2 generations, there may be some hope. The solution is evolutionary rather than political. Only the passage of time holds the hope of assuaging the bitterness on both sides." It says, "From its beginning, Israel has not established itself as a Middle East nation, but has identified itself as typically European. For this, well, okay, I disagree with that, but anyway, it says, for this reason, she is viewed as a Western thorn in the midst of the Arab world." Well, you're just a thorn, period. It says, "Demographically, Israel's population is constantly assuming a more Mideast flavor. Immigrants from Asia and African countries now account for approximately 52% of the Israeli population, although these Israelis do not currently enjoy the same status as European Jews. Full assimilation is simply a matter of time. In other words, time alone will make of Israel a Middle East state." It says, "On the other hand, the Arab world is gradually becoming modernized. Arab leadership is striving to bring Western culture, industry, and standards of living to their people. Therefore, as Israel becomes more Middle East, quote-unquote, and the Arabs become more West, quote-unquote, it is possible that the people will become more attuned to each other. Only in this way will the Arab desire to liquidate Israel wither away. This is a hope for the future, a hope for peace in the Middle East. It is a hope that must be fostered by the great powers of the world, particularly the United States," unquote. Again, signed Colonel Sidney Gritz. Again, this is another example. There's a lot there, but this is another example of how an Israeli, probably with dual citizenship, so to speak, makes its way into the United States military and then writes a pro-Israel term paper, basically saying again that the United States needs to facilitate all of this, pay for all of it, help all sides, we're not the bad guy, neither are the Arabs. Bring us all together and then everything will be fine. Again, given the fact that this was written back in 1966, it seems like quite the pump fake, I think. But again, there's a lot there. There's no doubt that the advancement of the Arab countries over there have advanced. Probably, I would say, certainly further than Israel has. But even so, there is no doubt that they are the keystone. If you can control them and control the Zionists, if not eliminate them as much as humanly possible, then you control the area. And again, this is the other geographic part which even the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian Jews haven't figured out, is that they don't own the majority of the land. They're surrounded by people that don't like them. Certainly not their political system, which, as we know, is Zionism, and trying to set up Ukraine as a second Israel, a second Zionist state. That can't happen. And Putin knows that, because why? It sets up one false flag after another, again, one fake attack after another, blaming countries that had nothing to do with it, so on and so on and so on. I think that that's really the keystone here. That's what people are trying to get control of and trying to stomp out and trying to stop. So take it for what you want. It's an interesting paper. Again, it's titled Israel, Keystone of the Middle East. That is the keystone, one of many. And again, if you can control it, then you can control them, what they do, how little they do, and then you essentially neuter them and they have no impact on anything. I think that's ultimately the goal here, because it would have to be. Other than that, you would just have nonstop killing all of the time, and that can't happen anymore. So just wanted to let you know that that PDF is out there. It does exist. I will put that on my website under the Government Documents tab, and it'll be the one at the very bottom of that long list if you're interested in checking it out. Okay, with that said, let me pick this bone very quickly. I'm not a fan of this individual. This individual, again, has openly come out, said they're Jewish, said they're a Zionist. That's fine. It's terrible, but whatever. Maybe not a Zionist, but either way, they are Jewish. And you can tell, of course, because of the way that they make their way onto all of these podcasts and all of these shows, gatekeeping information that, of course, comes out. I'm talking specifically about Mike Benz. Mike Benz, again, came out of seemingly nowhere. And now, of course, he's making the rounds on all of these shows when it comes to the JFK files. And again, gatekeeping as best he can about particular things. And again, he's clearly owned and perhaps blackmailed and a number of other things. Or he's just getting paid very well to make the rounds to, again, gatekeep. That right there should prove to people that this is a very real thing and that always happens. And when any time some kind of information comes out or is declassified or whatever that has anything to do with Israel, those that scream the loudest or those that become the most vocal or the most visible, those are the individuals that, of course, have the most to hide, they have the most to lose, and a number of other things. Ben Shapiro being another obvious one as well. He wrote an entire article about how the entire files don't even matter. Who killed JFK doesn't even matter. And again, this is just basic pattern recognition. This right here, again, should show people that anytime something like that happens, those individuals are not on the up and up. They just aren't. So I don't watch them. I don't listen to them. I don't pay attention to them because, again, it's just basic pattern recognition again. So, yeah, they're Jewish spies as far as I'm concerned. And again, they know what they're doing. That's my opinion, but they're certainly being bought by individuals and being paid by individuals who don't have the best interests of the United States at heart. So there's that, just a quick little bone to pick there. There was also, of course, this, and this has been going on now for approximately a week. Again, Chief Justice John Roberts was caught in an elitist club of judges and lawyers that includes James Boasberg, Burl Howell, Emmett Mehta, if I'm saying that name right, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. Again, these judges, these deep state judges, many of which, again, are foreign and Jewish and have other bloodlines, these individuals, of course, are not working the best interests of the United States. They are traitors. The best part about the executive branch is it is a separate branch of the government. So like I mentioned earlier in an AI post about Andrew Jackson being one of these individuals, again, who had judges rule against him, and then he looked at the judges and said, great, go enforce it. And of course, the judges can't, because they're not the enforcement wing of the federal government. The executive branch is. The military falls under the executive branch. So judges can write all the orders they want, but at the end of the day, it ultimately lies with the executive branch to do any enforcement whatsoever. Turns out, Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have done the exact same thing and said the exact same thing. They've looked at these judges and said, your order's fine and dandy. Now make your way to the tarmac and stop the plane. And they don't, as judges, because they can't. So all of this exposure, again, I don't think is an accident. These individuals are coming out of the woodwork because they're panicking. They're showing everybody that they're blackmailed. They're showing everybody that they're completely bought and sold. So when a particular, again, executive order is written, these individuals panic because they're told to. They're told to make moves on these particular actions against Donald Trump and his administration. And what does that do? It puts them between a rock and a hard place while putting a giant spotlight on them at the exact same time. We had no idea who this Boasberg guy was. He's a Jewish judge, we get it. But even so, we know that this is also a massive part of the deep state, the entire judicial system. It's not just the legislative branch, and it hasn't just been the executive branch in the past, and certainly military individuals in the executive branch with all the trannies and everything else that was going on. Gun running, drug running, you name it. But at the exact same time, it's the judicial branch as well. Always has been. So again, this is good. This is good exposure. It's waking this. It's causing people to wake up to this particular fact, which has been well known among many. But at the exact same time, there are endless people who wouldn't even believe that a judge would be dirty. Now, I'm not sure why people would be that gullible, but they are. So they're being exposed. Again, I like it. It's a great move. It's a beautiful thing. In fact, let me mention this, because this was kind of an interesting take also, and I think a lot of people have different takes on this. It has to do with Mike Waltz, who again is, I believe, second in charge here from Marco Rubio. He's certainly been associated with peace deals between Ukraine and Russia and a number of other things that have been going on. And he's a former congressman, of course, and a former war hawk as well. But he's been put in a position where, again, he has to basically bring about peace and be a part of bringing about peace. It's odd coming out of his mouth, given his war hawk stances in the past, that we have to wipe Iran off the face of the earth and we have to defeat Russia and all this and that. There's another angle with this entire dust up, essentially, which I believe personally has to do with catching individuals in the act. And it's not just maybe individuals within Trump's own administration, but of course media outlets and anybody else who they're communicating with. So again, this was from the Gateway Pundit, and it was titled, Trump Defends Mike Waltz, Says He's Learned a Lesson, Ends Speculation About Yemen War Plans in Group Chat. It says President Donald Trump officially put an end to speculation that sensitive war plans were compromised after it was revealed that a far-left Atlantic editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, every single time, was mistakenly added to a private group chat involving military deliberations. Speaking to NBC News on Tuesday, Trump somehow inadvertently admitted that the group text was real. He said, quote, Mike Waltz has learned a lesson, and he's a good man, Trump told the far-left news outlet. With those words, the president reaffirmed his trust in Mike Waltz, despite what the far-left media had tried to frame as a catastrophic security breach. The uproar stems from a recent Atlantic report that Goldberg was accidentally added to a Signal chat thread, the app Signal, where military strategy involving the Houthis in Yemen was being discussed. Goldberg's presence had no impact at all on the military operation, Trump said. Trump claimed that it was a member of Michael's staff who had Goldberg's phone number. It was one of Michael's people on the phone. A staffer had his number on there. According to NBC News, the president expressed confidence in his team, saying he was not frustrated by the events leading up to the Atlantic's story. Says the situation, Trump said, was the only glitch in 2 months, and it turned out to not be a serious one. Again, Careless, reckless, probably also possibly a trap as well. Again, why would a particular app be used to communicate among individuals in government? Seems remarkably insecure, of course. Seems, again, at face value, highly reckless. But again, maybe it caught a great deal of people behind the scenes who were attempting, again, to uproot particular things that don't need to be uprooted. Or again, throw a monkey wrench into a well-oiled machine. Who's to really say? But stuff like this, again, I'm not necessarily certain it's always accidental. Sometimes it probably could be, but even so, could have just been a trap, and it's possible they've caught some bad people. It's quite possible we'll never find out who those people are and exactly what they were involved in. It might just be that they just quietly disappear. So I'm not concerned about it in the slightest, just want to make mention of that very quickly. Okay, education stuff. Let me get into this, and I have a bit of an apology to make and a course correction. In the past, I have mentioned that Abeka, as a private Christian homeschooling online program, that it essentially qualifies for vouchers. As it turns out, Abeka does not at this point qualify for voucher money. If an individual, and basically here's why. In the state of Ohio, the way that they have it written out on their Ohio Department of Education and Labor website, and I assume it's like this in most states, again, where homeschooling is recognized, if not by a voucher system, and receiving, again, money back in your pocket as a result of not attending public schools. That the way that it operates is that state governments have, of course, their own homeschooling programs or virtual learning programs. For example, the state of Ohio has the Ohio Virtual School, or the e-school, as they call it. Basically, those two particular programs in the state of Ohio, for example, would qualify under the voucher system, but not Abeka, which is a shame. Because again, Abeka is a nationwide Christian homeschooling program, so you would think that it could sort of categorize itself, or at the very least that state legislation or an amendment to the voucher system would reword itself to allow for Abeka to basically fall under the umbrella of the voucher system. My hope in the future is that that is the case. If you were to take a school, a nationwide school, that is again an online Christian homeschooling program like Abeka, and you apply it nationwide, but more specifically within each state's voucher program, that would collapse the American public school system in the blink of an eye. Again, you talk about opening up competition. That would really do it. Now, the interesting part is this, and this does happen, and this is a very good thing. There are brick and mortar schools that do exist across the United States and in states where the voucher system does exist, where they use the Abeka system within that brick and mortar building. That qualifies that brick and mortar building as being a Christian school and being a Christian private school. And Abeka, of course, provides that material to those schools so that those individuals doing the instructing can then, of course, provide it to those students who attend that school. That school and those students would be eligible for the voucher system, certainly in a state like Ohio. But the real kicker and the real trick is getting an amendment on the books, on the Constitution for that bill, specifically having to do with vouchers in a state that allows online home learning through Abeka to be included under the voucher system. So let me give you, again, a quick example of the price. I know that there are people who listen to this show who use Abeka. That's awesome. They know who they are, and I agree with you 100%. It's a great foundation, I think. Again, I haven't gone through it page by page, but I do know, again, some of the pricing here. I'm going to ballpark it here, having looked at it once before. But if you select the online schooling accredited single grade curriculum with materials both online and in your hand, it's approximately $1,400 a year per child. At least, or I should say, maybe not per child, although it could be, but it's certainly for that singular grade. So say, for example, again, you want grade 2 material. Well, it's, again, accredited online, access to the online stuff with the books in hand delivered to your house. You're looking at, again, approximately $1,400. If you were utilizing the voucher system that existed or that were basically to be allowed to be used as a part of the voucher system, you're getting that money back, plus more, for future years. Theoretically, most of your schooling, again, would technically be free, which is fantastic. Again, take the town where I live, for example. Just the other night, they actually had a presentation. It was a separate presentation for the public, because everybody here in the state of Ohio is losing their shit because more and more individuals, again, are choosing charter schools and private schools. And the public school system doesn't understand why. They're saying, well, how do you know that the private school is better than what we're offering here? And how do you know the charter school is better than what you're offering here? Well, you might not. And yes, you have to dip your toes in the water to feel what the temperature is to some extent. But what it is it's a glaring shot over the public school system that they suck. And that the Ohio public certainly wants nothing to do with it. For example, in the town where I live, just like I mentioned when it came to the Lakota City schools and how they had thousands of students that were not even attending the Lakota City School District, which is a massive school district, and they had never even attended the local school district. They were already using the voucher system to basically not attend Lakota public schools. In the town where I live, last year there was something like, and this is according to the school district, so it's probably a much higher number, but it's something like 168 students were using the voucher system, and they had never even been students in the Talawanda City School District. That was last year. This year, it's well over 200. So that number is growing. There are more and more students, again, that are willfully leaving the public school system, and yet there are more and more students who are not even entering the public school system and taking advantage of the voucher program right out of the gate, as soon as they are quote-unquote school eligible. Again, it's fantastic. The problem is that the public school system refuses to acknowledge why things are the way that they are. They're not accepting any responsibility for anything that they've ever done. And all they're doing is just blaming other people. And they're not asking parents why. Why is it that you're leaving? Why is it that you've never attended our school district in the first place? Why are you taking advantage of the voucher system that, the state is offering? I mean, why is it that you're doing this? They aren't asking that question because they know what the answer is. The answer is they're all gay. It's just a bunch of gay curriculum, it's gay individuals, it's perversion, it's social engineering, it's political and social issues constantly being discussed in the school environment, not to mention the manipulation, not to mention the simple fact that the public knows all of that, and they want nothing to do with it. A great deal of the public isn't attending the public school system anymore because they know that COVID is a lie, that there is no such thing, but that the public school systems fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Again, Randy Weingarten, who is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, continues to take to numerous news outlets and lose her mind. She flips out on a constant basis. I've played recent audio of her, of course, in the war videos. And she's, of course, using every single excuse known to man. She's, it's all feeling, it's no fact. They're taking advantage of the disabled, the poor, the rural, and all of these other students who are not going to have proper education. And we need the public system, and the DOE has to continue to exist. She's screaming at the top of her lungs because she's directly involved in money laundering. And all of these individuals, again, coming out of the cracks and coming out of the woodwork are wrapped up in this. And that money was going to child trafficking. They were stealing from the public and they were moving it to NGOs and other individuals and endless other groups to not just socially engineer, but child traffic. She should be panicked. She should be screaming. But again, your average school teacher doesn't even know this. They have no idea. Again, here's another example of exactly why these schools aren't accepting responsibility for anything. This was from Breitbart just the other day. Transgender bathroom bans pass in Tennessee, and it says New Hampshire to protect women. Legislation to safeguard women by barring transgender people from women's public bathrooms passed in Tennessee and New Hampshire, with one bill on the way to the governor to be signed into law. The New Hampshire bill HB 148, which passed the state's House of Representatives on Thursday, will allow schools to ban transgender people from bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports teams. And if it's signed into law, it would allow the owners of the spaces included in the bill to bar transgender people without facing discrimination charges. It would also allow the state's jails and juvenile facilities to place those who identify as transgender in facilities based on their birth gender, not their assumed gender. Good. Again, the simple fact that that this has to be done is astounding. But this is the state of affairs, and this is exactly what American schools allowed for. They allowed this to take place. That's why COVID was a Trojan horse. It was all the perversions were inside of that horse. That once we abuse students with mask wearing and we make abusing students ubiquitous and acceptable, then we can abuse them any way we see fit. And we'll do it, of course, under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, of course, is in that same Trojan horse. Another example, of course, was New York University. They got caught based on what a hacker discovered within their computer system, that they were discriminating against whites and Asians when it came to SAT test scores and acceptance rates. Again, a place like New York University would never be upset that they were doing the thing that they intentionally sought to do. They're simply upset now because they got caught. But if you believe for a minute that all of these universities and colleges are acting ethically and morally when it comes to acceptance rates, they aren't. They're seeking, again, to always edge out whites. They're always seeking to edge out anybody who has a higher test score and then, of course, make them darker and bring in more minorities as much as humanly possible. Well, again, that violates endless civil rights acts. The problem, of course, is that that's very difficult to prove unless you have actual evidence, hard paper evidence. And that, of course, was hard paper evidence because it was showing all of the scores and then who they were actually accepting, which again was not whites and Asians, even though they were the ones scoring the highest. You also have this. This is from a while back. Michigan State University, this is from the College Fix. It says Michigan State University opens a $38 million sanctuary for minorities. Again, these people are digging in like ticks. And people are wondering why they're not going anymore. Michigan State University recently opened a $38 million multicultural center to act as a sanctuary for minorities with rooms designated for diversity, equity, and inclusion student groups. An education expert told the College Fix the center could violate President Donald Trump's recent executive order over banning DEI initiatives in federally funded institutions. It says the MSU Multicultural Center, MCC, guided by a student-developed mission, aims to provide a supportive space for students from historically oppressed backgrounds to learn, grow, and access the resources necessary to succeed and graduate from a predominantly white institution. The room reservation page for the center states. Again, it's racist in its approach, it's racist in its response, it's bigoted, and it violates, of course, the Civil Rights Act. That all white people are bad, you can come here, you'll be safe, and oh, by the way, we're going to bring in more non-whites than ever before because we're saying so, and by us saying so, that's somehow not breaking some kind of a law? It's ridiculous. Of course it is. They're doing this out in the open because, again, they view it to be normal. And even more suspicious, lastly, regarding this particular wavelength of thought here, The Prime Minister of Australia has urged to call an emergency meeting after Trump administration cuts funding to 7 Australian universities. Why in God's name are we sending money to Australian universities? And what do you think that money's going to? If you said Marxism and communism and those kinds of efforts, you would be correct. No doubt about it. I observed this back in 2019 when I went to Australia to give a presentation. Same thing. That's all I saw was full-blown communism. Anti-American, full-blown, again, communistic rage. It was beyond nuts. And then at the tail end of my presentation, which I've mentioned this story numerous times before, an individual in the back of the room said, "What do you think is the biggest problem facing education today?" And I said, "Communism, socialism, and Marxism." And you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, because that's who I was talking to. I was talking to open communists. I said, they're the ones that create violence. They're the ones that bring in all of these programs that, fertilize the seeds of division as much as humanly possible. This is the biggest problem. This is why it's a bad business model, and this is why it won't last. No follow-up questions after that. "Well, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Brooks. Have a nice day." And I was like, "Yeah, no problem. Where's the bar?" Which, by the way, I got to mention this. I had a very interesting dinner last weekend with a friend of a friend, friends of a friend, who are Australian. And they live in Western Australia. And it was absolutely fantastic. And these are patriots of the highest order. They're not jabbed. They stood up against all the jab mandates. They told everybody, again, over there in their work environments to go pound sand. They haven't put up with any of it. They've been very vocal about it. And it was it really was one hell of a conversation. Just fantastic people. I don't know if they're ever going to be on the show. I gave them my card. I gave them an open invite. Again, we had a great time. But they have a lot to share regarding what's going on in Australia when it comes to the jab stuff and all of the tyranny that went on over there. And I'm not sure what else I can add at this point other than I hope to have them on sometime so that they can talk about what they personally experienced. But it was messed up, no doubt about it. And as you would expect, the jabs over there in Australia are having their desired impact, which of course is depopulation and more government tyranny and political tyranny, and none of that's good. But just to wrap up education here very quickly, I will say this. There's some interesting local happenings that are taking place right now regarding the local school district. Like I said earlier, they gave a presentation to the parents, basically, again, encouraging all of the parents to go to the State House and to write to the State House and tell them what you feel about vouchers and how you don't like them, and it's bankrupting the public system, and we need all these programs, and we need this, and we need that. It's beyond stupid. And in their presentation, the superintendent, again, you give this guy an inch, he'll hang himself with it. I mean, he is not a good public speaker in the slightest. He doesn't handle question and answer sessions well at all. Again, even if somebody disagrees with him, he gets hot-headed and he sounds more gay than he already is. He's very flamboyant. And it's just unprofessional. He doesn't sound competent because he openly says, "I don't have all the answers. I don't have the answers." They even have a particular room, which they've actually had dating back to when I went there, where again, they have this separate store set up. It's like a coffee shop apparently inside of their high school or whatever it is. And they basically have the handicapped serving coffee to people. And they think that this is a selling point. They actually believe that having such a thing is a selling point for why people would want to send their children to a public school. That look at all the people we're helping, and we're giving everybody an opportunity, and we're doing this and we're doing that. And this is a perfect example as to why something like this has to continue to exist and needs more funding so that we can do more of it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you lower the bar when it comes to education, quote unquote, or the public schooling system, you lower the bar lower than it already is, everybody will go down to that level because that's the way that it works. A sinking tide lowers all ships, just like a rising tide raises all ships. If you remove ridiculous programs like that, and I'm not being insensitive, I'm simply saying that I bet there are better things that those students could be learning rather than just serving coffee, as if to say, well, this is all that their life is ever going to be, is working at a Starbucks behind the counter because they can't possibly do anything else. That's not for government to decide. And that's certainly not for the school system to decide. But if you lower the bar, everybody gets lowered with it. If you raise the bar, everybody rises with it. Endless people will not only meet or reach their potential, whatever that may be, and that's only in the eyes of God, it's not in the eyes of any human. They will probably surpass anything that a human thought that they were possibly capable of actually achieving or doing. But it's only the local government schooling environments, again, that seek to control that tide. How high or how low it goes. That's not up to them. And that's not a selling point. You had parents coming up to the microphone asking questions about the voucher system when the school system doesn't even know the entire story. And these are questions, again, that they could ask an AI system, I suppose, on their computer online. They could just look through articles. They could just, again, look it up through a basic search engine and find the answer to their questions. But they'd rather come to a microphone, speak publicly on the record, and sound like a moron. I don't understand it. Other than the fact that this is just what stupidity looks like. But every public school around here is panicking in the state of Ohio because the voucher system isn't going away, because it shouldn't. It's too important. What it should do is expand itself, like I said at the top. It needs to expand itself to include homeschooling online curriculums that are not affiliated with the state, like ABECA. Because the ABECA system is better than the state system. I mean, that's real competition. You want to put your own state online homeschooling program on the internet up for debate or up for competition? Compare it to an ABECA or a Calvert Education or these other, again, online programs. Then you would have real competition. But that should be up to the family to decide. The family shouldn't have to pick when it comes to receiving, again, more money in their pocket. They shouldn't have to pick between a local private school, a local charter school, or online government. That's not enough. I would go so far as to say that, again, those three systems are probably the least effective. But an individual family having the choice to, again, receive money back from government that was theirs in the first place, to then use it any way they see fit, in particular for an accredited Christian homeschooling online program that is nationwide, why would you not want that? So again, to a freedom individual and somebody who is freedom-minded, I think that's the way that this has to go in the future. Only communists are advocating for public education at this point, and they're all coming out of the woodwork right now. It's amazing. But they're not going to go away. And they're not going away because they're not accepting responsibility for what they've done, which means they're not learning, which means they're doomed, and they don't even know it. So with that aside, there's some other local education issues that I am not at liberty to discuss right this moment, but all I'll say is we'll see what happens, and if I find out more, I will certainly bring that to your attention. But it's some really dirty, dirty stuff going on. And talk about a school district not learning their lesson. They're between a rock and a hard place right now, but I'll just leave it at that. Okay, jab-related stuff. Let me get into Trump's brand new CDC pick for director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Again, keep in mind a couple of things. Number one, RFK Jr. is the head of HHS. Under that umbrella is the CDC and the FDA. I like who's running the FDA. I like RFK Jr. Nothing seems to be wrong with either one of them. Filling the CDC position is the most contentious because this is the one that Politicians are the most associated with, and it's also one of the more communistic wings of HHS. But again, if the FDA and HHS control, of course, the CDC, whatever the CDC says doesn't have to be what actually happens. Certainly not from an FDA or HHS standpoint. So regardless of what goes on here in the future regarding a CDC pick, or again, somebody being approved for that position, they could very easily be neutered or spayed in the blink of an eye and sort of, again, have any so-called power taken away from them. So with that said, regarding this recent pick of this Dr. Susan Monterez, if I'm saying that correctly, I think that there's an exposure with this, which is rather important. I think this is another Trump exposure move to see who supports this person, and then, of course, have the Anons get to work on this individual's background. So here's his truth post. Donald Trump, the president, of course, of the United States, he said the following, quote, "I am proud to announce that Dr. Susan Monterez is my nominee to serve as the next director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Dr. Monterez brings decades of experience championing innovation, transparency, and strong public health systems." He capitalized transparency, by the way, and innovation and those other words, for what that's worth. He said she has a PhD from the University of Wisconsin and postdoctoral training in microbiology and immunology from at Stanford University School of Medicine. It says, as an incredible mother and dedicated public servant, Dr. Monterez understands the importance of protecting our children, our communities, and our future. Americans have lost confidence in the CDC due to political bias and disastrous mismanagement. Dr. Monterez will work closely with our great Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert Kennedy Jr. Together, they will prioritize accountability, high standards, and disease prevention to finally address the chronic disease epidemic and make America healthy again, unquote. That was at 4:12 p.m. on the 24th. Now I want to play some audio from Dr. Monterez here from the past. This is about 6.5 minutes long. I'm not going to introduce it. Just give her a listen here in 3, 2, 1.
We think about advancing AI for healthcare in a number of different facets. So some are direct to the patients. What tools and what capabilities can we develop to help them really understand where they are in their healthcare journey and empower them to make great decisions? We also think about AI from the provider side. So how can we help providers better understand their patients? How can we help providers optimize their time within the health system as they're seeing patients, as they're trying to make complex decisions to create the conditions for improved patient health outcomes? We also think about AI from the defensive side. So we understand that there is a great vulnerability within the health ecosystem. More and more is coming online in the Internet of Things that are going to have an incredibly positive effect, but we also know it creates vulnerabilities. And so we're using that same AI technology to help defend against those vulnerabilities, to anticipate the negative implications that are happening within the health systems and to try to stay ahead of it. ARPA-H takes on the entirety of the health ecosystem. It's not just biomedical research. It's not just resilient systems. It's not just investing in the tech of the future. It is all of those. And what we do is we actually go out and we seek these incredible innovators. We call them our program managers. And they come to us and they say, here are the big problems that we're seeing in the health ecosystem space. We will fund anything across the health ecosystem so long as it helps further our mission, which is to improve health outcomes for everyone. So the AI cyber challenge fits so well within the mission of ARPA-H, and that we are funding traditional type programs, which are big and bold and ambitious. We also fund these challenges where we know that there is a large problem within the health ecosystem. And we need to have the most innovative solutions come to the table, to come in and look at that problem set in an entirely different way. And we have said, here are what we understand are those problems. And we've given them the access to so much of the capability that we see here at DEF CON. And we say, We aren't going to tell you what the solution is. You tell us how you would solve that problem. And we incentivize it through this challenge structure. The incredible benefit that ARPA-H is going to get from launching this type of a challenge is that we are going to see a diversity of solutions that come out from all of these challenged competitors, where they don't look at the problem the same way. They each come with their own perspective, and they say, here's how I would solve this problem. Here's the vulnerability that I'm finding. And we will be the beneficiaries. And ultimately, the whole health ecosystem will be the beneficiaries of what they're developing. So through this first year where we're getting to the semifinals, and then through the next year, we're actually getting to those finalists, we're already seeing some incredible work that's coming out of these competitors, and we're leveraging it to help solve some of these big problems. Coming into the AICC city is, I think, so well choreographed to understand the vulnerabilities that exist across the health ecosystem. So whether it is a clinical care site, an emergency room, provider back office, all of that is collectively now represented in AICC. So the cleverness of who came together to think about what needs to be present to create a health ecosystem to drive the competition so that AI Cyber Challenge really is well represented by what we see in the infrastructure of this village is incredibly well formulated. It is so thoughtful. It should allow anyone who is wondering, what does it look like in a healthcare ecosystem, to understand the vulnerabilities that are present in a way that maybe they've never even been able to think about. They've never experienced, they've never understood. Where do those vulnerabilities come from? How do you identify them? How do you fend against them? That is all represented here in the AICC village. But this space is moving so fast that we're also hoping that it illuminates something that can help us anticipate what is the threat space of tomorrow, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. And so as we build the capabilities over the next year of AICC, it was going to help lead us to what are we doing in our program portfolio in 2027 or 2029 or 2035, because it is going to continue to evolve. And this is the place where we really think that we can drive technical understanding of how this is evolving. And what do we need to do now to shape the future to be able to continue to have safe operations within our health systems? One of the other great benefits of having ARPA-H here and really being at the forefront of this technology is part of our core principles as an agency. We really want to make sure that the capabilities being developed are democratized in such a way is that they will benefit not just the large health systems, those that have revenue margins where they can bring on the greatest technologies to be able to create a safe and secure environment, but also those who operate on a very low margin. So those in the rural environment, critical access hospitals, FQHCs, all of which have the same sets of vulnerabilities. Now, when we create these capabilities, our goal is to make sure that they are accessible and they are affordable and implementable so that we create a safer space across the health ecosystem. We also want to make sure that we are recruiting program managers that come in with the same level of energy and excitement to really identify critical problems that they see within the health ecosystem that they want to help be part of the solution. And when they come to ARPA-H, we give them the capabilities to drive forward in significant ways to be able to address those problems. It has just been an awesome experience, and I'm so excited that ARPA-H is now part of this collective DEF CON and AICC, and I'm looking forward to many opportunities to come in the future.
So first of all, the word yikes comes to mind. Second of all, this is a stereotypical, pale, gray-haired, wide-eyed liberal. There's no doubt about that. The group that she's advocating for, ARPAH, is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, which on their website, based on their mission under their About Us section, says they accelerate better health outcomes for everyone by supporting the development of high-impact solutions to society's most challenging health problems. Well, the most challenging health problem is the ubiquity of an inability to ask questions and then answer them objectively. If you go against the system, you get either ostracized, you lose your job, or you get murdered. That's the real problem here. That's the real challenge with the health system. And of course, if you accept the health system, what happens to you? Well, you end up being a lifelong patient, or at the very least, your life is shortened and you end up dead. So both angles are about control and depopulation. Again, there's no way that Donald Trump wouldn't know this. There's absolutely no way. And I can't imagine Republicans actually voting for this woman, although there would be plenty of neocons who would. She's, again, perpetuating the technocratic state. She's a Bill Gates protege, so to speak. Certainly Anthony Fauci. Certainly she's aligned with all of these people. And the only way that she would, again, receive any acceptance is she would receive a question, I can see it right now, again, from the Health Committee in the Senate about the business of what Fauci was doing and what was going on during quote-unquote COVID and what can we do better? And she would openly say, well, mistakes were made and we need to learn from our mistakes. And there are some improvements that can be made. And I think that if we use AI systems and we use this and we use that, then we can communicate what those mistakes were and then arrive at more sound conclusions. I mean, it's all the jargon that all these technocrats use on a constant basis. This has to be an exposure move because this woman is as radical on the left as you can possibly get. So this is a wait and see moment as far as I'm concerned. It's just a wait and see. It's possible, again, she might even go through the entire confirmation process, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with this. It's an odd pick. I just think time's going to have to tell on this one. But again, it's beyond obvious, based on that video alone, the acronyms that she brings up, the particular groups and companies that she's advocating for here. Again, this is wireless body area network stuff, certainly from the medical angle. And it's not good. And again, you hear all these people, again, they're advocating for rural areas. Well, we'll get to the rural areas because they have the worst health care. Do they? Or do they have the best? Because they're staying away from people like you, and they're staying away from the technocratic state, and they want nothing to do with it. That's why I think, again, they're targeting in on rural areas, because they want to wipe these people out also. I don't know. It's alarming stuff, but I don't trust her, not in the slightest. Unless, of course, she's all of a sudden done a magic 180 in the last few years, and she's realized that viruses aren't real, all shots kill people and make them ill. And that, of course, is why we have all of the illness and death that we have here in the United States and around the world. But I'm not holding my breath on that one. So we'll keep a close eye on her. But yeah, past words matter, and past associations matter also. So there's that. Okay, couple of other good things here on this front. First of all, Dr. Mack has put this out not that long ago. And I just want to read this brief summary here of one of his articles. And it had to do again with the uptake of ivermectin inside of an individual based on their diet. Again, some of the prescriptions for ivermectin say you can take it on an empty stomach, but what he has found apparently, along with others, is that if you take it with a high-fat meal, it has a faster uptake. So again, here's what it says. It says, absorption of ivermectin was significantly higher when administered following a high-fat meal, approximately 2.5 times that in the fasted state. It says the following here. Pharmacokinetic parameters of ivermectin following single dose were consistent with previous observations and with linear behavior up to a single dose of 120 milligrams. Substantial variability in absorption was apparent across doses, but this phenomenon was attributed to absorption rates of less than 50% in the fasted state and to the parallel panel design of the state. It says absorption of ivermectin was significantly higher when administered following a high-fat meal, approximately 2.5 times that in the fasted state. Although the effect of food on absorption of ivermectin had not been previously studied, this result was not unexpected. when the drug was administered in a hydroalcoholic solution, a similar increase in bioavailability was observed compared to administration as a tablet. It says the extent of agreement between these results suggests that the poor solubility in water of the lipophilic ivermectin molecule limits absorption. But agents that help to solubilize the molecule, such as alcohol or bile, increase absorption of the drug. However, the standard high-fat meal is not representative of typical food ingestion. Furthermore, it is reassuring that despite a substantial increase in the AUC of ivermectin with administration of a high-fat meal, no toxicity was noted. It says the apparent half-life for ivermectin identified in the product label is 16 hours or longer. The overall estimate from this study, approximately 18 hours, is slightly longer. Half-life estimates varied somewhat, with dose and means of administration from approximately 15 hours in fed subjects given 30 milligrams of ivermectin doses to approximately 20 hours in the same group following administration of 30 milligram ivermectin in the fasted state. Since the bioavailability is substantially higher when the drug is administered in the fed state, and a shorter half-life was observed in this state, it is possible that the half-life observed following oral administration is influenced by slow absorption of the drug rather than being a true estimate of elimination half-life, unquote. So, apparently, take it on a full stomach, or take it while you're eating a semi-high-fat diet. That seems to be a higher absorption rate regarding that, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Finally, regarding this is from the Food and Drug Administration, and they have a website now, which I will link in the description below, titled the Chemical Contaminants Transparency Tool. It says the following, quote, the FDA has published a variety of contaminant levels for poisonous or deleterious substances in human food in various guidance documents and regulations for industry. It says, for ease of reference, the Chemical Contaminants Transparency Tool provides a consolidated list of these levels. Contaminant levels listed in the Transparency Tool include tolerances, action levels, guidance levels, derived intervention levels, recommended maximum levels, and advisory levels. It says tolerances and action levels are defined in 21 Code of Federal Regulations CFR Parts 109 and 509. Other types of contaminant levels are not defined in the regulation, but have been used to advise industry on level of contamination that may pose a health risk or may be avoidable through good manufacturing practices. Essentially, it's a database and a search engine. There's a basic search, an advanced search, and a field search. You can look up particular kinds of foods. You can look up particular kinds of ingredients. It'll tell you exactly what it is. It'll tell you what food it's in. It'll tell you, the contamination level, certainly the type. It'll give you, again, the amount that is in that specified food. It's an interesting tool. It'd be interesting to see how many people actually use it. Again, people are creatures of habit. They're going to go to what they typically eat. But if you see a particular ingredient on a box and you're interested in, again, what food it is in or what it actually does, or how much of a particular level it exists within that particular food, this might be a decent database to take a look at. Again, I fully understand it's government, but at the same time, this is apparently something that they haven't had in the past. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just boils down now to how many people actually use it for reference. Okay, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, again, I will link that in the description below if you're interested in bookmarking that or checking that out. Thank you for listening as always, and I'll catch you on Friday. Peace.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.